Welcome to the Minimalist Educator Podcast, a podcast about paring down to refocus on the purpose and priorities in our roles, with co-hosts and co-authors of the Minimalist Teacher Book, Tammy Musiowski-Borneman and Christine Arnold.
In today's episode, Tammy and I are reunited with our dear friends and former colleagues Gemma, Kass and Meghan Kemp. Our topic for today is effective planning meetings. Gemma and Meghan have both worked as international educators for many years. Meghan has worked in the US, Germany, Singapore and England as a teacher and curriculum leader. Gemma has worked in England, Bali and Singapore and is now a primary lecturer at St Mary's College, London. Hi everyone and welcome to today's episode of The Minimalist Educator. Today Tammy and I are here with Gemma, Kass and Meghan Kemp. Welcome everybody. How are we?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. We are super excited. This is a really special podcast episode. We actually have 4 people recording together in one room, and the 4 of us met while teaching in Singapore together, our classrooms all in a row, and we formed this lovely bond. And now here we are in the location of England recording a special episode of The Minimalist Educator. So thank you again for being with us today.
No, and it's not been since 2017 that we've all been in the same room together. So that's lovely.
Yes.
Very special. So we wanted to pick your brains today about team meetings and what are some effective strategies that we can utilize for our team meetings.
Gemma, Meghan, and I used to teach on a grade 2 team in our school in Singapore. And so we used to often have, our weekly collaborative meetings together. And one of the things that I really valued about our teaching time together was those meetings, because we had a lot of, we got things done. We were effective with our time use. We came up with great teaching experiences for our students. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So Meghan, maybe you can start us off with, you've been in other schools since our time in Singapore as well. And so maybe you have some ideas to share with our listeners about some effective meeting strategies or tips for just keeping people on track in meetings, something like that.
Yeah, I think we lucked out, and I think depending on your team, I think we lucked out in that our personalities were quite similar, and the way we worked and process things and planned was quite similar, and that always helps if you're kind of on the same page as your teammates. But that's not always the case, and it's not always the case with the people you work with. So I think a huge just something that works is to have an agenda and have to start with an agenda, have people adding to it. So, it's not just one person's agenda, but you can refer to it maybe as the week goes on. You can add things to it so you know kind of what you're coming into, or what it helps to, if you refer to it and then you can think about it, and then you're able to come prepared or a little bit prepared to those meetings. That kind of gets you off on a good start. So I think having an agenda is an item that is quite useful.
Yeah, and I guess to sort of build on that, I think our friendship and our working relationship, it could potentially be a blessing and a curse, because obviously you've got the agenda, which is great, but I suppose it's making sure that you're not going off piste and talking about sort of non-work related things during those times, and staying focused and staying with what you've got on the agenda. Because I think, it's so tempting just to be checking in and like, oh, so what are we doing later, and having those conversations, but making sure that that's sort of that protected time to focus on the work things, which that you've got to be quite disciplined in. But I think we managed that really well.
I agree. And I think you mentioned the check-ins and like not kind of getting stuck in that. I think it is important to have that in your agenda though, right? So like a 5-minute check-in, you do have to recognize how everybody's feeling at the time, because, usually meetings are in the daytime or after school, and you've been through whatever the day has held for you. And so you want to stay true to a check-in, to check in with each other personally. but then move on with what you got to do. Yeah, Jen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when you said about how people have got on with their day and where they're at the end of the day, I definitely remember going into some of those meetings, and Tammy and Meghan, and when Christine joined us for some of them as well, to be everyone being really focused and ready to go start planning for next semester or next term, and I would be like, oh, we've just got through the day, like doing really things in your head. But actually, again, it's having those really good relationships, working relationships, and shared values of actually we all do want the best, and you were all very good at getting me back on track. So okay, let's go. We've had our check-in and we can get this done. So yeah, that was good.
I think too, sometimes kind of just seeing how going with how the day is, like if you've all had it just, just one of those days and you just need that time to debrief, but then being like, okay, well, we didn't get this done or this done, let's divide and conquer, or let's, you all take on something to get done and bring back together, the next day. Or so it's not a complete, not that it was a waste, because you need that debrief time, and that's really important, but that you also are looking at, okay, well, this is what needs to happen, this is what we were going to do, can we kind of divvy that up, get that done, and then and following through, because it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I'm going to do that, but when your teammates are counting on it, it is important to follow through and then to come prepared. So maybe it's, well, we're going to be doing this or looking at this next unit at our next meeting, and it's so frustrating when your teammates or when the people that you're meeting with, your colleagues, aren't prepared. Or I get frustrated with myself if I haven't come prepared. It feels like you've let the rest of the group down. So coming prepared, it's only going to help you move forward in those that next step, I guess.
Yeah, and it makes good use of your time as well, rather than say wasting people's time. But we know as educators, time is precious, and if you're not prepared, it is going to eat into that.
Exactly back to what you were saying before, Meghan, about everyone having access to the agenda and can add to the agenda. I think that's really key too, because if it's just one person, the team lead or your coordinator or so on, who is taking on responsibility for that, other people don't feel like they have ownership over what's going on, or they're not really as keyed into what's going on. So I think that's a really important part, making sure that everyone is contributing to that agenda and filling it in.
You mentioned something key too, I think, Meghan, about the accountability to each other. So like having those pieces where you might not use your meeting time to just sit and meet and plan or whatever, but you're going to come back with something to your next meeting that you're going to contribute. And I know that we used to do that, where it's like, okay, we're doing this part of the inquiry cycle or something, and we'll try this out. Let's try this kind of activity, and I'll let you know how it went in our classroom or my classroom, things like that. And I think that can help an effectiveness in a team as well, because then that, everybody's contributing. Then it's not just like Christine said, here's our agenda, we're just gonna, like, someone else has dictated it to you. It's more collaborative.
Yeah, rather than we're doing this meeting to you.
Right.
It's we're all working together.
I guess as well, thinking about the purpose of meetings. I know there's always that saying like, oh, it could have been an email. Like, if we're thinking about what we're putting on those agenda items, are they always a tick list of things that you've just got to go through, got to complete this paperwork? Or do you get those opportunities to engage in that professional dialogue and learn from each other? Because as you were saying there about, okay, if we're going to try and do this as part of our inquiry cycle, how did it go when you tried it? It's reflecting on that and sharing those practices and learning from each other. And I think we had a really good balance of, yes, there's important stuff that we just have to get through and we have to do, but also to learn from each other's areas of expertise and what everyone else was bringing to the table. So yeah, I think we had quite a good mix of that.
It kind of reminds me of what you're saying, just that the difference between collaboration and cooperation, and that tick list of, okay, we can all cooperate together and get these bits done that need to get done, and that's fine, but actually really using our time together to collaborate and talk through the planning. And you might as well use that time together and put your brains together and bash out ideas and talk through that. I mean, that's the fun stuff, when you get to sit around and talk about new units and lesson plans. And All the other stuff you can cooperate on and divide and conquer and say, oh yeah, we'll make those copies or get this ready or tick that list off or do this spreadsheet. But the fun bit is when you want to sit down and have those conversations and think about those creative lessons. And that's the good bit you want to be there for.
Yeah. I'm wondering about collaboration in meetings. So have you experienced, because some people plan better independently and have a harder time in a collaborative, like being collaborative in a team. But there are times when we just really need to gather together and brainstorm and being creative. And so what would you suggest if teachers are working in teams and there is some challenge in getting people to actually collaborate? Because it is different from being cooperative, like you said, like, yeah, we're getting along, we're getting things done, but let's put our brains together, because that's not a fun bit for everyone. Like, I love that. We love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's not everybody's cup of tea.
It really depends on what the challenge is, I think. Is it a dynamic where, I've worked in situations where you're trying to brainstorm and come up with ideas and there's just one person kind of stonewalling every idea.
Yeah, right.
And then you've got other people who just have such different pedagogies about how things should be done. So I guess it really depends, doesn't it, on what kind of trouble you're having in collaborating.
Mm-hmm. I think it also depends on the culture within your school, because if you're in a school where collaboration is just part of the everyday, everything that you do, and you're used to doing it, then you're going to find it a little bit easier than if you're a new teacher who's just joined that school and that hasn't been something that you've been a part of. That's quite tricky, because just as we teach the children those skills of how to work with others and how to share ideas and how to take turns with contributing and how to resolve conflict and come to agreement, actually as adults, especially because we are more opinionated, as you say, people are coming with different experiences, different levels of expertise, and then actually having to share. And if it's something that you fundamentally disagree with, that's really difficult to then say, well, I've got to collaborate on something. So I don't think it can be something that we just expect people to know how to do and do well. It's almost like the same, if it's built in within the culture of the school, this is how we do it, and you learn and there's opportunities to practice that. I think that's when it happens more successfully.
And building off of that, I think by having an agenda, if somebody's not comfortable or confident, or they don't like collaborating as much, or they need more time to think or process, or they like thinking about it on their own first. If you're working in a group, sometimes I like to do my own research and come up with my own ideas so that I feel like I've got enough to contribute. So by having that agenda, and okay, well, next week we're going to be talking about this, or at our next meeting we're going to be looking at new ideas for this, then I might go away and do my own research and think through some things and come prepared and come with ideas, rather than coming kind of cold to that meeting and then having to throw things out. I think I would, if I hadn't thought about it ahead of time, I think I'd kind of just sit back and see what people had to say. And
it's easy for people to jump to the conclusion or make assumptions that perhaps if you're not ready in that moment to collaborate, are you not much of a team player, or is it not something that you want to be involved in? But actually, I guess it's about recognizing that there are going to be different levels of comfort, and sometimes people not wanting to share their ideas, is it because they haven't got them, but perhaps they are not confident and concerned that people aren't going to appreciate their ideas, or that they think they might be silly, or they haven't done their research and are ready to share them yet. And I guess, when we're talking, if my point about the culture is, it's not about jumping to those conclusions that people aren't able to, but it's recognizing there's going to be various levels of comfort, and maybe that's what you work on developing. How do you help and support people to feel more comfortable with that collaboration?
There's got to be that level of trust, right? Like, I feel okay putting an idea out there, and maybe we won't go with my idea, and that's okay. And it's not that people hate me and disrespect me, but it's, I can trust and feel respected enough to put those ideas out there and maybe have them rejected, and that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. And it's non-judgmental, and a supportive environment that appreciates ideas, whatever they are.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thinking about it's, you know, a rejection of an idea or getting feedback or, you know, some critical feedback.
I hate that.
But to your point, right? Like sometimes teaching is very personal to people, right? And so it is hard to get, if you're in a meeting, how do we get teachers to open up who might not feel that comfort yet to share ideas because the fear of being judged about an idea? But like, you know, it takes a while sometimes to like get past, like, teaching is personal, yes, because you're pouring yourself in, but idea sharing is not really personal. Like, you're trying to create these great learning experiences for students, and not all experiences are great ideas, but once you talk them through, they could become really good ideas. So like, how can we, I guess it's how do we build that trust, right? If there's people that are a little bit reluctant to share the ideas and or are afraid of the feedback, and build that into the team dynamic or the team meeting time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's really valuable to get to know people outside of just the school, the classroom environment, because if you have a little bit more social capital with the people you're working with, I know it's not always going to work that way, but I think it really does help if you've had a coffee or a meal with people and had a chat about life outside of work. You've got a little bit more empathy for each other and each other's situation, so you might not be as judgy.
Definitely. That was something I found. So in my current role, I'm a lecturer in primary education, and when I joined, it was during the pandemic, and I spent my first year meeting my new colleagues via Zoom. And I certainly felt in those meetings that we'd go through the agenda, and there was that fear. And I suppose it's part of joining a new workplace anyway. You're sort of starting to understand the procedures and who everybody is, etc. So it takes you a bit of time to warm up anyway. But I definitely felt that what I was missing were those face-to-face interactions where you'd go and make a cup of tea in the staff room and you check in like, hey, how are you? How's your day been? And none of that was happening because you're on Zoom, and although we'd be like, hi, hello everyone, but if I haven't first of all met someone in real life to get to know them, it's unlikely I'm going to be completely open about my life. I'll be like, oh yes, I'm fine, thank you, and then off you go on to the agenda. And as much as everybody was absolutely lovely, those relationships beyond the meeting, those relationships beyond the classroom hadn't been built because it was all through a screen. So it was something that I really thought about during that time, the importance of those relationships beyond the meeting.
I mean, and that just connects to the relationships we build with our students. And if we want our students to feel comfortable and confident to share their ideas and work collaboratively and cooperatively with each other and us, and it's the same thing, isn't it? You're building those relationships, so they're not going to feel comfortable talking to us or sharing with us. So why would it be any different with adults? But I think sometimes we forget about these things with adults, just like you were going back to that, talking about that collaborating doesn't come naturally, and that we have to learn how to do that. And children need that guidance and support, and they have to learn how to collaborate as well. So I think sometimes as adults, we forget that we need to build those relationships as well. And that's really important. That's a very good point.
They're valuable. The investment in time to get to know people beyond a meeting agenda, I think, is incredibly valuable. And I think it increases effectiveness over time. And, that time is really worth it.
It does make me think, though, about as adults how much we prefer choosing our groups that we work in rather than being told. And yet we do that to kids all the time, don't we? This is your group today. Deal with it.
Yeah. I think kind of to what you're saying, Meg, about, we have to allow the practice of the skill, right, of collaboration. And if we aren't modeling good team meetings as adults, we shouldn't really expect that in our classrooms, right? It's kind of like we're being a little bit hypocritical here. if we're not allowing some trust to be built or allowing time to skill build. But I've been in some meetings in the past, not recently, but just where I was like, I would never want this to happen in my classroom. So why is this happening in our meeting right now? And it doesn't feel good. And so, I know that happens a lot. Thoughts about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So much of the interactions between adults, well, not so much, but there's interactions between adults that we would not allow our students to carry on like that without having a word with them. So yeah, we definitely should be striving to always be the model of that ourselves first, shouldn't we?
Yeah. I think something that in not my teacher role, but as a PYP coordinator role, coming into team meetings, something I found valuable was just to ask the teams, how can I help you? What do you feel we need to focus on? We need to do our agenda or go through our agenda. We need to fill in the planners, but what else can I do to help you? Would it be helpful if we talk through it and I type it? Would it be helpful for us to have, to talk through 15 minutes of our meeting and then you guys want to go and work on this or that? But just to find out where they were, I guess that goes back to the building relationships. And it's not just my agenda, it's our whole team. Because ultimately we're working towards the same goal.
I think too, like that clarity, right? Doesn't Brene Brown say clear is kind? And so in your agenda, if your expectations are very clear about what your objectives are, and that might be collaboratively or otherwise, you want, same thing with our kids. We want it to be mirrored in both places.
Absolutely. So Meghan and Gemma, what we like to do before we wrap up the end of our podcast episode is ask for a pair down pointer to leave our audience with. So it could be something to do with what we talked about today with team meetings, or it could be any sort of tip, strategy, pointer that you may have about how we can pare down, focus on a priority, make life easier for ourselves. I'm going to start.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm going to link back to a conversation that we had recently about how important it is to put a timeline on agenda items.
Yes.
And I think that's a good point to bring up today as well, is that if you can put a timeline, we agree to have this finished by this date or this time. I think that is a really good pointer to have to pare down and keep things prioritized.
Excellent.
I think I might steal this one from you, Jem, but building relationships, I think that can just, there's so much that you can gain from that. So many positives. So I think that helps.
Worth the effort.
Yeah. Worth the effort.
Yeah. And Jem.
Okay, it might sound incredibly obvious and simple.
They're the best ones.
But I think if you have a meeting and you've got various things that you need to show or share, to already have those open on your screen so that you're not cutting into time trying to find them and waiting for them to open. And I just think all those moments that are lost whilst people are trying to find documents, and if people could turn up to meetings with those ready to go, if we're thinking about valuing time, that's just something that makes a bit of a difference, doesn't it?
Oh, there's nothing worse than those virtual meetings where you're watching someone faff around with their different tabs and what's working and why can't you hear anything, and
it's a file inside a file inside a file inside a file, and then the wheels spin while you wait for it to open. Yeah.
Thank you, Jem. That wraps up today's episode of The Minimalist Educator. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Meghan and Gemma.
Today's episode was brought to you by Plan Z Professional Learning Services, forward-thinking educator support. Find out more at planzplservices.com.
Be sure to join Tammy and Christine and guests for more episodes of the Minimalist Educator podcast. They would love to hear about your journey with minimalism. Connect with them at PlanZPLS on Twitter or Instagram. The music for the podcast has been written and performed by Gaia Moretti.